Military sources in Egypt say the defense minister is meeting with representatives from the ruling Muslim Brotherhood and Salafist party. The meeting is a result of an invitation from the armed forces to all political factions to discuss a roadmap for the country. Now, both the military and interior ministry are expected to release statements soon. Meanwhile, more than 16 people were killed and 200 wounded when gunmen opened fire on supporters of President Mohamed Morsi. Well, as President Mohamed Morsi continues to defy the call by the military that he steps down, TVC News' Ayya Harraz explores the army interventions in Egypt and what a probable takeover may mean for the country.
Streets covered with graffiti of the military and statues of soldiers stand tall here in Cairo. The army has a unique presence. The revolution of 1952, led by Gamal Abdel Nasser, saw the beginning of the evolution of the army as the most powerful and organized institution in Egypt, the biggest in Africa. It was seen as saving the country from a monarchy and colonial powers. But it was during the unrest era that saw the army becoming more involved. The Camp David peace treaty and the Infatah were a number of ways redirecting the nation's political and economic path. From Anwar Sadat to Hosni Mubarak, the army took the backstage. Then nearly 30 years later, the army reappears, accommodating the fall of the former president's regime, re-emerging as a saviour of the people. But something else happened during the revolution. The army on a rare occasion clashed with the protesters, tarnishing their pristine image. But Yassine says the army's role is meant to always remain a neutral one.
Upon joining the Army Academy, one is forced to sign a paper stating he is not tied to any political party. The armed forces must always be neutral and does not maintain loyalty with any party.
In the past, the army has intervened in limited tactical ways, but only 2 months in office, at a show of strong will, President Morsi went around limiting the powers of the army. A year later, a meeting behind closed doors revealed a statement from the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, handing Morsi a 48-hour ultimatum. Less than 2 years ago, protesters gathered here in Tahrir Square, chanting "Down with the military rule" and calling for a civilian one instead. Now back once here again, crowds gathered to celebrate the 48-hour ultimatum issued by the Supreme Council of Armed Forces. The statement was seen as a declaration of support to the people and seeing their demands through. But now it seems there's an apparent truce between the army and the people. And the question is, if Morsi does decide to leave, what will the army do next?
I felt reassured as an Egyptian once the army issued that statement.
A civil leader is not suitable for our country, but the army is, and it is our defining character.
A winning move on behalf of the army, reappearing once again as the nation's heroes. The Brotherhood's anger at this move reflects a sense that they've been outplayed by the soldiers they thought they'd put back on the sidelines. Ayya Harraz, TVC News, Cairo.
Well, our North Africa correspondent told us more about the demonstrations in Egypt.
The revolution of 1952, led by Gamal,
came out and they were celebrating that the army had finally stepped in and intervened. They saw it as a good move on behalf of the army, and many were positive about the next few days and how to see and waiting and watching how the army will deal with Morsi now that he's decided to reject this ultimatum. So it is a very strong positive reaction by the people who are happy to see the army return to the political scene. So now what we're waiting to see is that after 4:30 p.m. when the military tries to issue their statements on what they plan to do next, if Morsi still decides not to address the people's demands, is people are expecting more clashes. Yesterday we saw very fierce clashes between pro-Morsi and anti-Morsi supporters in the Giza district of Cairo and in other parts of Egypt. So now people are waiting intensely and watching what will happen next, especially if pro-Morsi supporters will come down to the streets and decide to fight for Morsi.